The Pawnee Nation, who originated over 7,500 years ago, are roaming the Great Plains of America. Historians believe that the Pawnee tribe came from Mexico, although ancestors of the Pawnee believe that they have migrated from the southwest. The tribe originates from the hunter-gatherers, who were around some 7,500 years ago. It is believed that the Indian tribes who speak Kandon all originated from these hunter-gatherers. Once the Pawnee migrated to the Great Plains, they stayed there for the years between 1300 and 1500. The name Pawnee comes from the Sioux word tariki, meaning a horn. Hundreds of years ago, the Pawnee were split into 4 different sub-tribes. Those tribes are the Chowie, or Grand Pawnee, the Kitkahaki, or the Republican Pawnee, the Pidahawariata, or Cabbage Pawnee, and the Skeety, meaning Wolf Pawnee. Throughout their history, the Pawnee were always known as a peaceful farming tribe. The Pawnee were not to be messed with, though, because they could defend the tribe if needed. The Pawnee's enemy were the Cheyenne tribe. The tribe not only relied on all the crops that they grew, but they were greatly dependent upon the roaming buffalo, following them wherever they went. The tribe prayed before they went out on a hunt, hoping to increase their chances of success. The Pawnee's religion was based off of the sun and the stars. They believed that every single star in the night sky was a different god, although the Pawnee's main deity was Tariawa, their creator. They believed that the positioning of the stars would determine their harvesting season. In the spring, when they planted all of their seeds, they would perform many different religious ceremonies. Up until the 1800s, they would offer up a human sacrifice to the heavens. In the fall, they would offer up some of their crops and corn, thanking the gods for a good harvest. The Pawnee believed that there was an afterlife, and their souls would follow the Milky Way up to heaven. The Pawnee's language, Kandon, was spoken by many Great Plains nations, including the Wichita, Caddo, and Arikara. The tribe was very good at using sign language to communicate with other tribes that did not speak Kandon. The tribes were broken into different communities with their own chieftains. Chiefs would come together and communicate their community's needs, forming a tribal council. Currently, the tribe relies on a business council, or the Nasharo. After the council was over, the chieftains would come home to their families. In their families, the oldest woman was considered to be the most important member in the family. The other women in the family cared for the kids and made food, harvested crops such as corn, beans, pumpkin, squash, watermelon, sunflowers, and tobacco, while the men held social positions, made weapons, and used those weapons to hunt buffalo, raccoon, skunk, and quail. The men could have more than one wife, and the women could have more than one husband. Regardless, all of the mother's kids were considered to be brothers and sisters, no matter who their fathers were. The families lived in earth lodges. An earth lodge was a hut or shack that was constructed from willow as a structure and not the dirt surrounding and supporting it. Generally, earth lodges, if properly maintained, could last for 3 to 6 years. When the men were out hunting buffalo, they housed in teepees. Each teepee had 11 poles supporting it and was draped with deer hide, and each teepee held up to 18 Indians. Their homes did not provide much warmth, so they wore heavy clothes primarily made up of buckskin. They wore moccasins on their feet that were made from otter skin. The Pawnee were very festive and loved standing out. They decorated their skirts, shirts, and robes with moons and stars mainly. The women wore leather dresses all year long and leggings during the cold months of winter. The men wore loose-fitting shirts and also wore leggings too. They also wore 2 different types of belts. One held up the clothes, while the other one carried necessities such as tomahawks, knives, tobacco, and a pipe. The Pawnee loved decorating their tools, homes, and clothing. They often dyed porcupine quills, which were their favorite material. They also used colored beads and paint. When it came time for change, the Pawnee were quite willing. They never resisted by going to war when the U.S. federal government forced them off their land. Instead, they made many different treaties. One of the treaties gave the Pawnee a reservation in Nebraska in 1875. Between the years of 1833 and 1872, the Pawnee had negotiated 4 different treaties. Before those 4, the Treaty of St. Louis was negotiated between William Clark and Augusta Chateau. In St. Louis, on June 18, 1818. This treaty granted peace with the U.S. and officially recognized them as allies. Since the Pawnee and the U.S. were now allies, some Pawnee Indians were used as scouts in the U.S. Army under the command of Frank and Luther North. The scouts helped protect railroad workers from other Native American tribes whose land that they would be entering. Such friendships with the U.S. angered the Sioux Nation to the extent that they launched a surprise attack and killed 150 Pawnee Indians. With the movement of some unfamiliar territory, the Pawnee's numbers dropped drastically. It is estimated that in the 1800s there were close to 10 to 20,000 Indians, but by 1906 there were only 600 to 700 Indians. These number drops were thought to have been caused by intertribal warfare, disease, and hunger. The history of the Pawnee dates back many thousands of years ago. 7,500 years ago, the Pawnee descended from the hunter-gatherers in the Central Plains. In the year of 1900, the Pawnee settled in the Nebraska area. Many tribes that passed by them were amazed by their rituals. And if you move ahead in Pawnee history 400 years, in the early 13th century, the tribe left the plains to go to the Mississippi Delta. It is believed they moved due to climate change. Later in that century, they moved back into the Great Plains and settled down in the Nebraska and Kansas River valleys. Again, moving ahead 400 years, the Pawnee first saw horses, of which were brought over by the Spaniards. They used the horse to be more efficient in traveling and stalking buffalo. It wasn't until 1848 that people really started to become aware of the Pawnee Nation, when people started to head west to California to strike it rich in the gold rush and the promise of fertile land. 3 decades later, the tribes were forced from their land reservation, only for it to be returned to them in the 1960s by the U.S. federal government. The nation is now holding steady on their reservation. The Pawnee produced a self-taught artist, Charles W. Chapman, who was born in 1944. Chapman was famous in the 1980s for his portraits of the Native Americans. Besides being a famous artist, Charles Chapman also was a horse rider, rodeo rider, and a construction worker too. Another important person that the Pawnee produced was John E. Eaglehawk. He was a Native American rights activist and attorney who served as the executive director of the Native American Rights Fund. He helped to protect all the Native American tribes' ways of life. The Pawnee are faced with many problems that all of society is dealing with today. They are struggling with drugs and alcoholism, poverty, hunger, and child neglect. They develop solutions to all these problems by setting up health programs, substance abuse programs, community service programs, child welfare, and feeding the elderly. Still, to this day, the Pawnee are surviving. Even though they are small in numbers at only 3,190, their influence on tribal art and poetry will be forever changed. The Pawnee are true Native Americans.